Hi, folks. It's now just Bill and Jonathan. Thank you so much for joining us on the Passive Wealth Show. I am Bill Fairman. This is Jonathan Davis. Have you ever wondered about note purchases and how funds, large and small, handle the capitalization of their funds? We're going to fill you in on that right after this. Reminds me of the old Spider-Man show.
Does.
No, no, no.
Well, it's like
That
the
was
pow, the pop, the
yeah, that was Batman. Sorry,
kaboom. Yeah.
Batman.
Yeah.
Again, Bill Fairman, Jonathan Davis, Carolina Capital Management. We are lenders in the Southeast. We make real estate loans for investors. If you're an investor looking to borrow some money short term, we actually have a long term program now as well for
Yep.
portfolios as well as single family
We'll
homes.
do multifamily up to 30 units. We will do portfolios. And then we will also do portfolios up to about 5 million, and then single families.
Excellent.
Mhm.
So go to carolinahardmoney.com, click on apply now. If you're a passive investor looking for passive returns, go to the accredited investor tab and click that on. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, follow us, all that good stuff.
Hit the bell.
Oh, yeah, forgot about the bell. Also, we have a comment section on the right side of the screen, the way I'm looking at it, or underneath, depending on the platform that you're on. We're always happy to answer any questions or chat back and forth with you. So,
what was the question?
As many, we're going to talk about note sales. We're going to talk about capitalizing funds, or how funds that are in the lending business or funds that are in the note business, how do they continue to recapitalize their funds so they can make either new loans or they can buy more notes that are available out there. How do you do that?
Mm-hmm.
Well, you have to sell them.
You have to sell
or
them.
You have to buy them. It depends on, if you need the capital or not. One of the biggest issues that I have as a fund manager, and most fund managers have, is making sure that there's a balance between having enough capital to do your business with and not having too much capital. Otherwise, if you have too much capital, then the yields for your investors go down because you have lazy money that's not working.
Yeah, if we have too little capital, our borrowers don't like us because we're not closing loans. We have too much capital, our investors don't like us because they're not getting the yield they want. It's great. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a constant balancing act. Wendy covers some of that stuff in her Wednesday with Wendy. Don't forget to click the link to schedule a time to talk with Wendy. She does mentoring on most anything real estate investing related. By the way, she's really good with the short term rentals.
Yeah.
As well.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead.
Oh, so what we wanted to talk about is, so when you're like an origination fund, you are either a balance sheet originator or you sell off all that you do. Now, we are kind of the hybrid between the two. We balance sheet a lot of the stuff that we do. We balance sheet everything that we originate. We originate everything with our own funds. But then to recapitalize our fund, we will sell off single or tapes of loans to private investors or to institutional investors. And that is to recapitalize our fund so that we can make more loans and originate. The reason I think that we decided to do that was we like to be in control.
Yeah.
We don't want to, we don't want to be relying on, hey, did you get the wire to the attorney? We got to make sure we're closing this. We're in control of that.
Right.
We make sure the wire gets to the attorney.
Well, you really, I believe you're in a better position if you have the ability to move some of the portfolio. And why is that?
Mm-hmm.
Well, if all the capital is yours, you're you are always going to run into situations where you either don't have enough to make loans with,
Mm-hmm.
or you have too much capital sitting around not working. If you originate a decent amount of loans, or you're picking up, let's say, existing notes, and you're always in need of additional capital, you're always going to be in a better position because you can continually turn the portfolio that you have.
Mm-hmm.
You're never going to have to worry about having too much capital,
Yeah.
and you have the ability to. First of all, most people that are buying individual notes are not accredited investors. Not everybody is an accredited investor.
Yeah.
This gives us and other funds the opportunity to allow people that are not accredited investors to purchase these notes and still have an opportunity to get into what it is that we're doing in our funds.
Correct. And a lot of people have self-directed IRAs, and they don't want to go through the taxing process of underwriting a loan, originating a loan, and all that goes with it. They just want to purchase it and put it in their IRA.
Yeah.
So they could be accredited, they could not, but an IRA is a great tool for buying notes.
Now, in our particular arena, we're doing short-term loans with construction. Now, if you're buying an individual loans, you don't want to get into the collecting of payments and then doing the draws and all that stuff. You want somebody else to handle that, so you want a servicer, which that's what we're doing. We will service the notes. You're buying something from, say, a fund like Eddie Speed has when he has notes that are available. You still want to have a servicer.
Yeah, you can service it yourself. There's tons of third-party sub-servicers.
Yeah, but you're typically, if you're buying notes from a note company, they are typically longer-term consumer-oriented loans.
Correct.
And you really have to have a servicer to stay in compliance with consumer mortgages. If you ever have to foreclose on these folks and you're not in compliance, it's so easy for a decent attorney to keep you from foreclosing on somebody. You always want to have a third-party servicer handle all that for you. The other thing is you don't want to have to deal with it. You just want to get that mailbox money, right?
Yeah.
And this having a third-party servicer allows you the ability now to sell those notes off later. So let's say, for example, you want a certain amount of cash flow. I don't need the cash flow now. I'm going to go ahead and sell this loan off. Or I paid $100,000 for this. Maybe I can sell 5 years of the payments to somebody else and get some of my money back to invest in another note. And after that 5 years, then you start getting the payments. You still need a servicer to do that. That way, the consumer really doesn't see any change. They're still sending their payment to the same place. Nothing really changes. They do get a letter saying that your loan has been sold to a new servicer, they say, or a new lender, but you're still making your payments here.
Yeah.
That's really all that happens there. So it's buying notes is a great thing. If you want higher returns or higher yields, you're typically going to do the shorter term notes.
Yeah, correct. Now you can get higher yields on a longer term if you're buying them at a discount.
Right.
So, there are distress notes. There's even, scratch and dent notes. There's a whole assortment of them out there.
And by the way, if you're buying a really small note, let's say it's a $20,000 note, it only takes, it's not really hard to get a nice yield at a discount because all you have to do is lower the note amount by $1,000 and you can jack your yield way up.
Yeah, I mean, on a small one like that. I mean, before I did lending here, I bought distress notes part of that, and I mean, you would buy a note that had like a 5% rate on it. You're buying it at such a steep discount. If you got that thing performing again, I mean, your cash on cash and your return was like 12 to 20% based on what you're buying it on. So there are opportunities. Now, I'll take this moment to say, for everyone who started at the when COVID hit in what I guess more or less March, April 2020. Um, I saw so many people starting distressed debt funds,
Yeah.
and the product just still isn't quite there. So
Yes.
they're
You have to be patient.
you have to be patient on that. But yeah, I mean, will the product come? Probably it will. When, that's the question. Yeah.
Yeah. So I worked for a very large commercial lender before the crash,
Mhm.
and they had, as soon as everything started going down, they had already started a fund for purchasing distressed assets.
Exactly. Yep.
And it took them several years before they actually started purchasing any assets. And,
Yeah. Well, because in that scenario, that's the 2008 we're talking about. The courts were just overwhelmed
Yeah.
with the mass amounts of foreclosures. Could that be the case? This time, maybe. I don't know. I mean, we have to wait to see when the funding and I guess the moratorium on all these things starts to taper off, and then who's left able to afford their home, who's not.
Well, I also want to mention that it's just not individuals that buy existing loans.
Mhm.
There's a lot of institutional investors that are out there buying notes. You have hard money companies out there that Jonathan was mentioning that they actually don't fund the loans themselves.
Most of them out there don't fund the loans themselves. Yeah.
So it's what we call in the business table funding, whereas they're closing it in their name, but the person that they're selling it to is actually sending the funds to the attorney's office.
Yeah, they're not even selling it to them. So if they're
And-
table funding, it's typically it's
Yeah,
done on a white label.
It's like being a mortgage broker,
Yeah.
so to speak. But it's closing in your name, and as soon as the thing closes, it's being transferred over to the person that actually funded it.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with that, except that
They won't have loans to sell you.
The broker doesn't have control.
Yeah.
And that was one of the things I hated about being in the mortgage broker business. We had a variety of different programs that we offered, which was good, but at the same time, you didn't have control. Things didn't always work out, and you always heard those horror stories about somebody buying a house and they're out there at the attorney's office with their U-Haul truck full of furniture ready to move in, and then the loan doesn't close.
Yep, exactly. Yeah.
That's not very good, especially on a Friday.
Yeah. Well, there, like you said, there's different tiers. Like we have our own fund, we originate the loans, and then we can sell those off.
Right.
We can sell them off to institutional investors or hedge funds. Sometimes they aggregate them and securitize them. Sometimes they're just holding it as a different asset on their books to offset some other underperforming things that they have.
And what Jonathan means by securitizing them, they're basically selling them to other Wall Street investors.
Yeah. Well, so if to give you a peek under the hood, we sell the loan to them, and they take a reduced rate on that loan. We keep a yield spread on it. Then they aggregate a bunch of those loans that they're buying from a whole bunch of different places, and then they securitize those and they sell those at a premium to somebody else. So they almost, if not fully, recapture the yield spread that they lost when they securitize it.
Right.
So it's a way for them to make a chunk of money quickly.
And some of you may be wondering, well, why don't we just sell everything to the institutional investors? Why are we bothering selling them to individuals? Because
before you get there, we sell to institutions or hedge funds at a much lower rate than we sell to our one-off investors. That we call them one-off because usually they take one loan. We sell to our one-off investors at a much higher rate than we do to our institutional investors. So why would we do that?
Because we're greedy.
No.
We actually make less when we sell them to institutional investors. But we make
more
less when we're selling them to individuals.
Correct.
And we raise the rate a bit and lower it to you a bit because we're trying to even it out. And why is that? Well, our fiduciary responsibility is to our fund investors to make sure we're getting them the best return.
Mhm.
Okay. Um, at the same time, we have the dilemma of institutional investors, and I say, I've got to watch what I say. Wall Street investors are like antelope. They're all running in a herd, and then all of a sudden they hear a scary noise, and then they take off running in the opposite direction.
Well, one
And
person gets their hand slapped for something or
yeah,
loses some money, and the rest of them don't want their hand slapped or to lose money, and they move away from that particular asset.
yeah. So they love our space now, but it doesn't mean they're going to love it in the future.
Yeah.
So if your business model is fully wrapped around that business model, then when they pull away, you don't want to be stuck without any capital.
Yeah.
And so we take advantage of them when we can, but we also would rather stay. And I don't mean taking advantage as taking advantage, but
we work with them.
We utilize them while we can. And if
Yeah.
Something happens, we still want to have our private investors. So we've had private investors that we've had for years and years, and they've been very loyal to us. And we still want to continue to give them the opportunity to be on the lending side and get a good return at a much reduced risk than actually owning the properties.
Correct.
Right?
Yep, absolutely. So it is important to us to maintain both facets. All your private investors typically, if you do what you're supposed to do and you're not just throwing spaghetti at the wall to see what sticks on your loans just because you know someone's going to buy it, if you're doing what you're supposed to do and you're underwriting appropriately and you're performing, they're not going to go anywhere. That's a great return with a relatively low risk.
Mm-hmm.
The institutional investors, same thing. They're not. They like that product. If you don't throw spaghetti at the wall, you underwrite correctly, but they're more likely to change course when something that perhaps yields a higher rate of return or carries, in their eyes, less risk. They're going to pivot and move that way.
Well, I can tell you one right now that is a guaranteed return.
Guaranteed return. Oh boy.
Yeah, and a very large percent of the endowment funds for most of your major universities are invested in it.
What's that?
Life insurance.
Mm-hmm.
So they're actually invested in death benefits. So if you ever see those commercials about 1-800-NEED-CASH-NOW,
yep,
they're buying fixed repayment annuities. So if you won the lottery and you're getting so much per year over 30 years, well, they'll give you, say, half of that money up front, and they'll just give you that, and then their profit is the other half of the money.
Yep.
Right? They'll get the payments over time. Death benefits, if you have an insurance policy that you no longer want to pay premiums on, they will buy that policy for some of the cash value, and they will continue to make the premiums. And when you pass away, they're going to get, they're the beneficiary now.
Mm-hmm.
And let's say if you find out that you're terminally ill and you want to go ahead and cash that out, that's another thing.
Yeah.
But they pay an average of 16%, which is not bad, and it's going to be a guaranteed return. You just don't know when.
Yeah, you're probably going to die.
But there's only so much of that to go around. There's a lot more real estate on the debt side than there is on the death benefits and the annuity stuff.
Yeah.
So there's only so much of it out there.
Yeah.
But who's to say there's not going to be something else that comes up and a nice shiny object that they want to go to.
Yeah, and to kind of as pivot off this, if you all are interested in buying notes but you don't understand the process or the documentation that goes with it, if you all would be interested, I would be just fine to put together a 30-minute to an hour kind of presentation on what are all the documents, what do they mean, what do they do, how do they work together? Because in our loan packages, I think we end up with somewhere around 12 to 15 different documents.
Sure.
depending on what we're doing. Sometimes it could be closer to 20 if it's a more complex deal. Now, if you're buying like conventional loans, even on the like especially on the commercial side, it can get really wonky. Like you can get into like splitters and spreaders, and you can get into all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
So there's a lot to it, and understanding those things will help you make the best return on your money because there's no surprises, or there's fewer
Right.
surprises. There's always going to be a surprise.
Also, at the same time, you could do these loans on your own. You could lend directly to a person,
Mm-hmm.
but they're typically going to be short term. And again, if you don't have an extensive network, your money may be sitting there waiting around, and you need companies like ours that you can go ahead and pick up a note or two from
Mm-hmm.
to keep that lazy money working.
Yeah, I mean, because you want to do it on your own, but like, do you know what documents? Like, oh, you just need a note and a mortgage, you're fine.
Yeah.
It's like, well, do you? Is it a business purpose loan? Are you lending to an LLC? Does that person you lend it to end up moving into that property, and now you can't get them out? And they say, hey, it's not a business purpose loan. I can live here.
Right.
Then you didn't have a business purpose affidavit. You didn't have the things that you needed to protect yourself.
Yeah. So we'll put together a webinar type presentation, more educational type presentation.
Yeah.
To go over all that. You can also schedule an appointment for Wednesday with Wendy.
Or
anyway, she'll teach you how to also evaluate properties. She'll go over a deal with you. Now, it's only 30 minutes, so you have to pick your poison, so to speak. But if you're new to the note business or lending, a good way to do that is to buy existing notes from companies like ours. I mean, there's others that do it as well.
Mm-hmm.
And then you learn along the way. So you earn as you learn.
Yeah.
You're going to be able to go through the appraisals, the documentation for that qualifies the borrower, and how to do the draws, and
yeah, I had
best practices.
I had a great question from one of our investors who buys loans from us in a one-off scenario. They called me the other day and said, so what's the purpose of a guarantee, and is it needed, is it not needed, and what does that mean? So I took 20-30 minutes on the phone and explained the whole deal, what it was, what it can do, what it if you don't have it, what can happen, if you do have it, what can happen. So those are the things that we do here, that I think that set us a little apart from other guys. You can actually call me or Wendy or Bill, and you can ask a question, and we can spend 20-30 minutes walking you through it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We're happy to do it. One of the things you have to make sure if you do these things on your own is, and it's always good, you always want to have a relationship with that borrower. Everything is about relationships.
Mm-hmm.
The problem with any relationships is sometime if you've been doing it too long, you let that person get away with stuff you normally wouldn't with folks that you have been doing business with. My point is always stick to your guidelines. Don't deviate from them unless there's circumstances that make up for it somewhere else.
Documentation is only needed when something goes wrong. So
right.
always make sure you have if it's going great. We don't need to refer back to the docs. But something will go wrong. Someone who you've been lending to for 5-10 years, something will go wrong.
Yeah.
It will. So that's why you always need that proper documentation. And if you don't have it, if you're like, oh, no big deal, just send over a note, and whenever you can, give me a recorded mortgage. And it's like, that's a little too lax. And if something goes wrong, you find out they never recorded that mortgage. Now you have an unsecured note that's not tied to anything.
All right, we're going to wrap it up. By the way, thank you.
Sorry, I can talk a lot about.
Thank you, Wendell, for sharing. We don't really try to entertain; it just works out that way. Thank you guys for joining us. Again, it was the Passive Wealth Show. We are Carolina Capital Management. We make loans to real estate investors throughout the Southeast. If you're interested in borrowing money, go to the carolinahardmoney.com and then click on the what is it? Apply now tab. Scott keeps throwing stuff in there, and I keeps throwing me off because he says you guys are smart, and apparently I'm proving that we're not. Where was I? Oh, if you're an accredited investor and you're looking for passive returns, hit the accredited investor tab. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, hit the bell, and have a wonderful week. We will see you next Thursday.